We are here with the manager of brand strategy for BR Walkoff and also the co-host of Locked On Dodgers, Vince Samperio. So, Vince, I wanted to start off. You have 217 hats. And I wanted to ask you, when you wake up in the morning, how do you figure out which hat you're going to wear?
Yeah, it kind of depends. If there's an outfit for the day, then I can match it to an outfit. It's usually like outfits are built around the hat. So there's a hat I want to wear, then I'll build around that. Or if it's just like a regular work week, I usually wear a lot of black or a lot of dark colors, and then I just kind of pick one at random to kind of fit the day. I remember every time I start a new job, I usually tell them like if it's a hat thing and they kind of know, I'll tell them, all right, I'll go 3 months without wearing the same hat, and then just kind of play off that. So. It's sometimes I forget that I have hats and then I'm looking, I'm like, oh yeah, there's one I didn't remember I had.
Is there one that sticks out in your mind that's like one of your favorites?
Uh, there's a handful of them that I like are go-tos. This one, the trash pandas with the sombrero, that one's pretty cool. And then there's a few other ones that are like more custom or minor league ones, but for the most part, it just kind of depends how I'm feeling that day.
That makes sense because I'm a big hat guy myself. You know, growing up playing baseball, loving the game, and always wearing a hat just sort of signified like made me feel like I was back on the field. And so for me, when I'm looking for hats, I'm very very picky about which hat I want to get, and especially if I'm going shopping for hats, my friends are like, "All right, just buy one already," because I'm trying on five or six of them, looking at them how I look in the mirror, stuff like that. So do you usually like the fitted, snapback, or you picky like myself with picking out your hats?
Yeah, I'm fitted only. And I used to be more picky. Like if I do go into the store, and you gotta try, even if they're all 7.5, you gotta try them all on to see which one fits best because
Yeah.
they're all sewn differently. And then I put a lot of trust into online shopping. So for the most part, it hasn't burned me too much. There's just, sometimes you grow out your hair a little bit and then some hats don't fit, but then once you buzz it back down, then it's all good. So yeah,
That
but
makes
I'm
sense.
a fitted hat only guy. So
That's awesome. So, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to bring you on is because you have a very unique journey within working in sports, specifically social media. And, I know that there's a lot of people who, whether they listen to my show or they're just an overall sports fan, that loves the Bleacher Report content. And from your time, getting into the sports industry, can you kind of go over a little bit of your path and where you got to where you are right now?
yeah, it's been a long journey now at this point, and it's been interesting, especially seeing a lot of younger people now, whether I've interviewed them or if they ask for help or whatever the case is, and a lot of their resumes are a lot more stacked than mine were coming out of college, and it's different, but when I first started, this was almost 10 years ago now. It was social media was just kind of starting out. Most sports media companies either weren't there, or if they were there, it's interns were running social media. There wasn't really strategy. There's just kind of learning the ropes. And I think I got in at a good time because I got in at the beginning and able to grow and kind of see everything as it's happened. So yeah, I mean, in college, I was started out as graphic design major actually, which ended up helping down the road because you just have more things in your tool belt. So, I knew how to use Photoshop. I knew how to use some of these other, Adobe stuff. And that helped out. I moved into journalism, thought about being a sports writer, and then, kind of kept developing there and then got an internship with the Lakers and Dodgers and Raiders website back in the day. And then kind of transitioned there into Dodgers and then started running social media for like a Dodgers based brand. And from there, met a bunch of people, did a bunch of things, got to cover the team, got to go, be in the press box, media access, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, somebody I had met when I started as an intern was at Bleacher Report, and he told me that they were looking to hire for social media. He recommended me. I had an interview the next morning. A couple phone interviews, and a month later, I'm moving from LA to the Bay Area to work for Bleacher Report and social. And, I didn't really know what to expect. I had the Bleacher Report app, but I hadn't really, and I followed them on social, but, like I said, at the time, social was a little bit different. And
Mhm.
when I got there, it was kind of a next step for obviously me professionally, but also for Bleacher Report. They had just kind of revamped their social strategy. they had developed it into two different teams. So they had like the social team, which was, basically us, with where I was at, where we were day-to-day coverage of NBA and every other sport, and cutting highlights, posting highlights, stuff like that. And they had the separate team, which was kind of creating the content that most people probably recognize now, with the special, the treated highlights or the graphics, or the pop culture references and all that kind of stuff. So from there, it kind of took off. I was at Bleacher Report for 2.5 years, running mostly night shifts, NBA, MLB, college football Saturdays, a lot of that stuff. Just, thinking of captions, thinking of packaging, thinking of different ways to go about it. And, it was fun. It was fun, even though I was working, 2 to 10, my West Coast time. At least being on the West Coast, you're not working late. I know a lot
Right.
of the East Coast people got to work till like 1 a.m. for some of these, sports events, but it was fun. And, I was able to learn a lot and get a lot of experience. And I felt like there was just a lot of people there, and there wasn't a lot of growth. So I ended up going to a startup in San Diego, which was more like player focused, similar to like a player tribune type of thing, trying to help players tell their stories. And had some good times there. Got to work with the mostly NFL players there. Got to travel to Indy. Got to travel, a couple places here and there. Got to go to the San Diego Zoo with Tyreek Hill, like super random.
Cool.
So yeah, it was a interesting time. But what I learned in that scenario was to ask a lot of questions when you're getting interviewed, because it was a startup, and they didn't end up lasting that long. It only lasted, I think, less than a year. Then I moved on, came back to LA. My goal is always to come back to LA. Came back to LA, got along with another startup running social media for a football brand, and then that developed into football, and then a baseball brand. And I was with Wave. Believe now they're called Wave Sports and Entertainment. They're the ones that run the New Heights podcast with Kelsey now, with the Kelsey brothers. So
Mm-hmm.
that was fun. And then pandemic happened, started working at home. And but when I left Bleacher Report the first time, I left on good terms. I told them, if you guys ever move to LA, or if you guys start a baseball brand, then feel free to hit me up. And yeah, and like early 2021, that's exactly what happened. They hit me up. They're starting a baseball brand, BR Walk Off, and they wanted me back, and they wanted me to run it, basically, kind of almost from conception. I started a month after it actually launched, and yeah, ever since then, I've been working remote out of LA, and doing all baseball stuff, and basically building a brand from the ground up. And there's been a lot of good, a little bit of not so much bad, a lot of good, a lot of fun. Been able to go to the World Series, been able to go to All-Star games, and this year World Baseball Classic, All-Star game, all that kind of stuff. So that's basically where it came down to. It's a longer story now, but it's been a fun way around. The whole time's been fun. And it never really feels like you're working, other than sometimes you're like, it's different now, where before, when I was working all sports, like, you can't enjoy the Super Bowl as much when you're working it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I can enjoy the Super Bowl. And then when I'm working the World Series, I'm at the game. So
Right.
you're still able to enjoy it, because it's a little bit different feeling.
And with any journey, you never know the twists and turns that you're going to have. And I bet, when you first left Bleacher Report, you didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know that you were going to be all the way back there. But, from the time, you brought up the startup, then working for Wave.tv, and then, obviously the pandemic hit. And prior to when, BR asked you to come back, what were sort of, the lessons reflecting on it that you were able to take from that uncertain time?
Yeah, I mean, that was one where luckily I was still able to work through the pandemic. It, just kind of became a remote deal. But, you did see a lot of people that didn't survive. And even now, even to this day, there's still people that are still, going through it, especially in sports media. But for me, it's always been, realize where you're at, realize what you're doing, but also never, never stop, never settle, all the cliches that you can think of. But it really does make sense, because from the past, if I didn't have that initial, graphic design thing, being able to have even basic Photoshop skills, that wouldn't have got me in the door in some places. And then, when I was doing the Dodger stuff, handling actual players and media and personalities and all that kind of stuff, dealing through that, uh, you know, interviewing people, being on camera, all that kind of stuff, that added to everywhere I've gone. So the biggest thing is, everywhere I've gone, I've picked up something, whatever it is, to add, kind of to make myself a little bit more invaluable, to, in case in the future I need to go somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
or something else comes up. So I think for me, it's always been that. And it's always like, be grateful. I don't ever really it's a job, yes, but for the most part, I've been lucky that it's a fun job to do. And then, I'm never really like, oh man, like woe is me type of thing. I can do the first world problems like, oh man, I got a flight, I fly in, I've been out for 3 days. I got to fly in and literally fly out in 5 hours. But, that's a first world problem. I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not a real complaint. It's just oh man, I'm kind of tired. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's always been, networking and then meeting people, shaking hands, making sure people know who you are, always, making sure you're representing yourself when you can, when possible. And I think it's all served me well because like the couple of times when I have been looking for work or just in general looking for someone to help out with some kind of project or something like that, it's easy for me to go on my socials and put out a call and or put out some kind of question and get answers right away. So it's served me well to kind of, like I said, add to the tool belt anywhere you can, and then just make sure you make yourself known and available and represent yourself well.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. That's one thing that I've been told by so many people is be as versatile as possible. And so, I've done similar things that you've done. I've written, been on camera, a little bit of graphic design, some social media here or there. But I know for people, especially, if they're in college right now and trying to figure out what that passion is and where they really want to be in the sports industry, how'd you sort of figure out through trial and error that, social media was your bread and butter and the place that you wanted to work in?
Yeah, I mean, it sprung on me, and then I realized right away that I was good at it. It's social media, especially if you're like in the live sports social media world, where kind of where I started out as, live tweeting Dodger games, and then at BR, watching events and reacting to them. It's all about the reaction, and kind of what we had it down as is like everyone has a group chat. If you're into sports, everyone has a group chat with friends where you're like, either if you guys aren't watching together somewhere, then you guys are all watching it somewhere, differently, but reacting to each other on text or whatever it is. And that's kind of what related it to, like, yo, how would you react to this if you saw it with your friends? Or how would you react to this if you were at the bar? That kind of stuff. And that kind of really resonated with me. And when I first started, I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I quickly realized like that probably wouldn't have suited me after a while, would have got old after a while. But the thing with
Mm,
social media is that it's always changing, always evolving.
right.
There was back then, it was mostly Twitter and Facebook. And then Facebook kind of went obsolete in terms of sports media companies, or at least where I was at. Then it was Instagram. Now TikTok's the big one. And, they're always constantly growing and evolving and figuring things out. And I think it's the challenge for me. It's always been the challenge. I don't like being stagnant. I don't like, being in one place or for too long. So the challenge of social media is where it really got me, where why isn't this working? This should work. Let me figure out why, or how can we package this so it would work differently? Or, okay, we did this. Now every other company is doing this. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing, figure out what we can do next, to be ahead of the curve. So I think that's what really got me was the challenge of social media, and it still gets me. I mean, I still don't understand TikTok and I don't think anyone does, but I'm still gonna keep trying it and keep figuring it out and figure out how to beat the system, even though you're never really gonna beat the algorithm, but you can
Yeah.
try.
And it seems like with TikTok, it's literally changing every single second of every single day. So it's never easy to fully figure out how to work it or utilize it. But one thing that I was curious, the whole thought process that you went through for this specific situation was we met at the winter meetings, and one of the biggest storylines out of the winter meetings was the Arson judge going to the San Francisco Giants, the John Heyman typo that everybody was talking about for the week and majority of the offseason when it happened. And for you being at the winter meetings, when you first saw that, I don't want to give away obviously your secret sauce of how you come up with these different things, but take me sort of through once you saw that initial tweet, what did you end up doing to ultimately put something out to get people's attention about that sort of typo?
Yeah, so well, I was at lunch when it first dropped, and I was like, like dang, like I had just seen John Heyman earlier in the day, and then obviously he's not going to tell you, but I was at lunch. I'm like, oh man. So then I'm on my phone figuring things out, working with luckily for me at the time, I have somebody, I'm manager, so I have somebody under me, so we're working together, kind of figure out, okay, get out the initial news. Um, and then the backtrack. So then you got to do the backtrack. But after the backtrack, then it's like, okay, how can we react to this on social? How can we, you know, keep this moment going, because obviously it's a moment. Arson Judge was trending pretty quickly after that.
Hmm.
John Heyman's getting flamed. So, you don't necessarily want to go directly at, somebody in the industry. But you want to be part of the situation, you want to be part of the moment. And that's kind of what we figured out. And, social media is a lot of, borrowing, cheating, however you want to say it, but it's not always original. And there was a photo that was made up really quick of Judge with the house in the fire in the background,
Yeah.
and from that one meme. And we found it, we threw it up, and we just kept kind of figuring out ways to react to it and package it. And that kind of became a thing for a while, Arson Judge. And it's still a thing to this day, a lot of commenters and stuff like that. So in the moment, it was hard. It was different because, on our end, we were prepared for Judge to sign with a handful of teams. We have jersey swaps ready. We're prepared to go, basically just filling in the contract language and then, putting it out there. So that's what we did. And then, we had to retract it. And then you get part of the moment with Arson Judge. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, how can we keep this going? And, it's a challenge, but we got it going. We figured out a bunch of things. We made Arson Judge into a thing without, personally attacking anybody. Heyman,
Hmm.
I still talked to Heyman later that day, and he was a good sport about it. He told us that he had people that told him one thing, and then when he put it out there, he had a bunch of people telling him that wasn't it. So everyone has an issue like that. But I think with moments like that, it's always about being prepared and then being prepared to react. So you can have jersey swaps ready, you can have graphics ready for a World Series or whatever the case is, and that's good. But you also have to be ready to react to things that you're not expecting or things that you're not really used to. And during the World Series, we saw those. I was just at the game and hanging out, and then you see those guys on the roof. It ended up being the workers there, but it looks like fans had gotten on the roof and watching the game, and you're like, okay, how can we react to this? So
Right.
we get a video, we put it out there, and sometimes you just let the people do the work and you just put it out there and keep it simple. I'm very big on social of keeping things simple, keeping captions simple, and then letting people bring in their own humor, bring in their own thoughts, bring in their own takes. And obviously that's where the engagement comes in. So yeah, it's being prepared, but also getting ready to react. And that's kind of where you win, is if you're able to react faster than everybody else.
That makes sense because I remember during that day, I saw that's the post that I was thinking of is the little girl with the house blown up
Yeah.
in the background and with the Aaron Judge sort of face on it. And I thought about you. I'm like, how did they get that up so quickly? But that's the one thing that I'm always curious about, especially with breaking news. And it's interesting to hear that you guys obviously already have the jersey swaps already figured out ahead of time. But is there any post that like comes to mind where breaking news happened and you had to get something out last minute and you were sort of like scrambling trying to at least react to it in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, even though he stayed with this, oh no, well, we didn't have the swap actually. When Carlos Correa didn't sign with the Giants and then decided to sign with the Mets, that was around 10 or 11 p.m. West Coast time. So that means, most of the people on the East Coast are asleep. I'm technically, not working, even though I'm always kind of working. Um, so yeah, I mean, you're not prepared for that. We didn't have a jersey swap ready. We actually had one in the works, but it wasn't ready yet. So, you go with the news right away. You try to think of the different storylines. So in that moment, you saw that, okay, the big story was, yes, Correa, but the other story was, okay, Cohen spending a lot of money. So,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of, okay, what did the Mets do this offseason? How much money are they really going to spend? They're supposedly their luxury tax bill and payroll is going to be around 500 mil. So you're like, okay, you got to think of something with money. So then, I thought of that video of the old video of Kenta Brunson back in the day where she's at the movie theaters with the guy and she's like, oh, he's ordering all this stuff at the movie theaters. And she's like, oh, you got money. So then for me, I was like, okay, look, boom, we signed Verlander. Boom, we signed this. So everything he orders is like Cohen signing somebody. And then at the end, it's Correa. And then it's like, oh, you got money. So like that was the reaction right off the bat there. And we put it up there and it did really well on, on a lot of different social platforms. And that was something we weren't ready for in the sense of him going to the Mets. We had it in the works, but I didn't know that's how we were going to react. And it just kind of came in the moment. And, it's one of those where growing up, watching a lot of different shows or the biggest credit I give is like VH1 had these shows like I love the 90s, I love the 80s, and there would be a lot of pop culture. Like basically they go through every year and the biggest pop culture phenomenons of that year. I used to watch those shows a lot growing up. So like if there was something I remembered from there, or it was like, oh, I want to watch that movie because of that. So like the references, being online, being in social media, like you just have to have it off the, either have it ready or have at least an idea of, okay, this is what I want. Let me find the video, let me package it, let me put it together. And yeah, it's something that you can't really teach. It's just a matter of I happen to watch a lot of stuff growing up and a lot of variety. And luckily for me, it's worked out in the sense that I get to use it on social media.
That's always the nice thing about, being able to have all these different avenues or all these different outlets to watch. And it's crazy how those memories come up out of nowhere. There's sometimes where whether I'm taking a shower on a long drive or something like that, I'll think of an idea and my immediate, thing that I want to do is go and work on it and go and make it happen and everything like that. So it's interesting that that's sort of how it played out specifically for the Correa thing, because when I woke up and saw that, I couldn't believe it. But that's the one thing that I think going into this season, I'm most excited about is seeing all these new faces, in all these new teams. Obviously, Correa went back to the Twins, but, Verlander with the Mets, all these different storylines going into the season with opening day creeping up even closer by the day. I was curious looking at some different teams. Who is the most underrated team in your mind?
Yeah, I mean it's hard because you in the NL it's going to be interesting because at the way it seems right now, all the same teams are going to make the playoffs. Like you have the three teams in the East that all got better. You have the Padres who got better, the Dodgers who maybe lost a little bit, but losing a little bit off a 111 win team is still a 90-95 win team, which should get you in the playoffs. The Central's kind of a dud, the Cardinals and Brewers and the Cubs might be that team. They picked up a lot of guys. They're hoping for a lot of bounce backs. They could be a team that surprises, but I think it's kind of the same team that it was last year in the Guardians, where they got the pitching, they got the young guys that, they really couldn't hit last year, but they have a lot of young guys that can come up. They got, Bo Naylor's brother. They got different guys coming up. They got, progressions of younger players. Steven Kwanzaa has another year under his belt. All these guys have another year under his belt. Jose Ramirez is still that guy. So I think, it's hard. They're like kind of the one team that's there that's supposed to be good, but you're not really sure. But I think that they're the ones, once they got to the postseason, they're the ones, you'd be scared of because you don't know what to expect from them. And it's kind of weird with baseball this year. There's not really, oh my God, there's one team that's going to win. And especially in baseball, we haven't had a repeat winner in forever, but you kind of know who's going to make the playoffs. Uh, I don't know if there's any team like that that's like going to be surprising in the sense like, oh, I didn't think they'd make the playoffs, but I think the Guardians are going to be one of those teams that are surprising at the end of it, where it's like, oh, they did better than we thought, or they're somehow in the World Series.
It always seems, I don't know if you feel the same way, but when I try and make these predictions or try and guess on what's going to happen in the major league season, never ends up happening like that. And majority of the time, if you put out like, record predictions or, way too early playoff predictions, majority of the time there's a team that comes out of nowhere and you're like, I didn't expect that whatsoever. So for me, it was the Diamondbacks. I feel like they're a team that has so much young talent. I'm curious to see how it all is able to come together and finally flourish, since they've been a little bit in the dumpster for the last few years, just trying to rebuild. And then obviously I said the Sox too. Just Sox fan had to go with the favorite team. And then looking as well into some teams that you're most excited to watch. For me, I was thinking the Rangers or the Cubs with all the things that they did this offseason. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, the Rangers actually that is a good one. That the AL West got better in general. Maybe the Astros are the only team that maybe took half a step back losing Verlander, but even then, Framber and all those guys are ready to kind of step in and be those people. The Mariners are always fun with Julio and all the young guys, and they got Castillo for a full season now. The Angels added major league talent at least. Who knows how they'll be, but when you got Otani and Trout, and if some of those guys can stay healthy. But yeah, the Rangers, if they stay healthy, that rotation is really net like DeGrom, Eovaldi, Perez, John Gray, all those guys that's a solid rotation. They added, Heaney, who could be good, could be not, who knows. And then you combine that with what they got offensively. And the big thing that's probably going to be a differentiator is that for some of these teams like the Sox, like the Rangers, like the Diamondbacks, they're in tough divisions, but they don't play their division as often as they would have in the past. Now with the new schedule, there are 5 less games against the Yankees for the Sox, 5 less games against, the Dodgers for the Diamondbacks, 5 less games against the Astros for the Rangers. And, unfortunately, the NL Central is where ANL and AL Central are kind of where you can beat up on some teams and, you're going to have more games against those guys. So, I think that's going to help out and it's going to make it interesting. But yeah, I think the Rangers and Cubs will be fun to watch, and Red Sox, just because it's like the Rangers added talent, but you're hoping they stay healthy. And then the Cubs and Red Sox are kind of the same in the sense that they added a bunch of guys that you don't know if it's going to be good or not. It could be really good, it could be really bad, or it could be kind of in the middle. So you're kind of wondering what's going to happen there. And for it to be the Cubs and Red Sox, who are, two of the more iconic franchises in MLB, they'll have more eyes on them than normal as well.
And you brought the schedule change, and there's a lot of the different changes going into this season. Obviously, the pitch clock, the no shifts, the bigger bases. I'm curious how you think that these rules might influence some of the different games throughout the season.
Yeah. One thing I learned MLB is pushing for pitch timer instead of pitch clock.
Hmm.
Trying to stick with the fact that, baseball is now run by clocks type of thing. You can't run out the clock, which is what was interesting to me when I heard that. But yeah, it's for sure in the beginning of the season, it's going to cause issues. I know, even just for the fact of guys trying to figure out, okay, what the pitch timer is. And, it's a matter of, are they going to take the penalty or are they going to try to rush their motion or rush their pitch in order to get the pitch off? And if that's the case, there's a lot more room for mistakes,
Hmm.
which mistakes are, can usually become home runs. So I think that one's, at least initially, is going to be really interesting. And then we'll probably around month 2 or 3, we're not even going to think about it anymore. And then once the playoff comes back, that's when it's going to be big again, because, the playoffs slow down so much. There's so much, adrenaline and stress and everything else going on with these guys. So I think it's one of those that initially, there might be a few games that are maybe affected by it early on. Rest of the season will be normal, and then playoffs, it'll kind of come back and rear its head. What I am interested to see is, the shift ban. It's going to add a few singles here and there for guys, lefties mainly, that, where Manny Machado is playing rover in the outfield. He's not able to do that anymore, but you can still pretty much shift guys around. Obviously, you can't have 3 people on one side, but you can have, 2 and then one guy literally in the middle. So that one, I don't know if it'll change too much, but yeah, there will be more hits. And by that nature, it'll affect some games just based on the fact of a guy hits a RBI single that maybe was an RBI single in the past. But the one I am interested in is the pitch, not being able to pick off plus the bigger bases. Will teams utilize that to try to, steal more bases? Because obviously teams have gone away from it, but it's fun to watch. Stealing bases is fun. We remember the Royals from, 2015, 2014. That was kind of one of their calling cards, is they didn't have much power, but they had a lot of speed and they were able to utilize it. And I think that's the bringing the fun element back. If you get more singles because of the shift, you get more guys trying to steal bases at the very least. More people in scoring position, stuff like that. I think that's where we're going to see the most change and the most thought, if teams actually try and utilize it. If not, if they're still going to stick with the fact of, oh, stealing bases isn't benefit, it doesn't go to our advantage, then it won't change much. But yeah, I think that for the first time in a while, we might see multiple guys with like 30, 40, 50 stolen bases, where we haven't really seen that in the last few years.
I hope so. And I'm also curious to see how the bases look like on TV. Kike Hernandez said that it's going to be very not appealing for regular fans at home. He said that they look like pizza boxes. So
Yeah.
curious to see how that ends up looking, and how, it correlates to maybe more stolen bases, maybe less injuries, stuff like that. But another thing that was sort of unusual throughout this offseason was the Dodgers didn't spend any money. Really nothing. And lost Trey Turner, but obviously, sort of like you mentioned, for a team that won 111 games, probably with sort of how their team is constructed, with not only all the young talent, but also the proven major league talent that they already have on the roster. I'm curious sort of your assessment or mindset going into the season of how you think that the Dodgers will ultimately play.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I said, from 111 games, even if you're 15 games worse, you're still a 95 win, 95, 96 win team. So it's not that bad. And at the start of the offseason to now, you talk yourself into a few things, but I think where it's at is like basically what it could come down to is offense. I think I trust the pitching pretty much. You got Julio, you got Kershaw, you got, even if Gonsolin isn't what he was last year, even if he's only 70% of that, that's still, a solid number 3, 4, 5 starter. Dustin May coming back one more year away from Tommy John surgery. He's who I'm excited about. May and Syndergaard, because those are two guys. May's already throwing up, or close to 100 around the time already. Syndergaard didn't have that last year, but supposedly his velocity is uptaking. I've always liked Syndergaard, so if getting him with what he already had, if he can boost up the velocity a little bit, and then working with the Dodgers, who for some reason have figured out how to help pitchers, then I'm excited about that. It's really the offense what it comes down to, and yeah, it's hard to complain about an offense that still has Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman at the top of the order, but it's their. I think the biggest thing with the Dodgers is, for the most, you could have multiple injuries. They lost Corey Seager one year, and they still, what they do, they picked up Manny Machado and they went on, and they've lost other guys for multiple times for big stretches of the year and been able to handle that. This year, they might not have that. They don't have the depth. Well, they don't have the known depth. Gavin Lux is your shortstop. You don't know what you're going to get out of him necessarily. He had a pretty good year last year before he got hurt. And defensively, he's had some throwing miscues in the past. Who knows if that rears its head. You're putting a lot of stock in Miguel Vargas, a young guy who is supposed to hit. He's one of the top prospects, but prospects don't always pan out. You're putting a lot of faith in Chris Taylor figuring it out. Struck out like 35% of the time last year, but now can he cut that back down to his normal 28% of the time? Like, I don't know. You're stock in change, which happened times over the past couple of years, but if that works out, then it helps out. You're putting stock there, which is kind of the big thing. And then the Padres did get better. The Padres are the rotation's maybe not quite as strong, but it's strong at the top, and then their lineup is pretty deep and very strong at the top. So I think with the Dodgers, it's interesting for me, at least as a fan, where I'm kind of more excited about this season. Every year, okay, Dodgers are going to make playoffs. Dodgers are going to win the division. They got surprised by the Giants in 2021, but even then, they won 106 games. Like, it wasn't the bad season for them. So I think I'm excited to see, not knowing exactly what's going to happen going into the season, and kind of having a little bit of element of surprise, knowing that you're still going to be good, but you don't know how good.
Right. And Vargas is a guy that I'm excited to see how he ultimately plays out. But it seems like the Dodgers, sort of like the Rays, and it comes, when Andrew Friedman goes over from the Rays to the Dodgers, they can never go wrong. It seems like they anytime there's question marks, it always, majority of the time, goes in their favor. But, as you mentioned, the one thing that they need to do, which as a fan, I bet this infuriates you year in and year out, they can win 111 games, they can win over 100 games, but it's just getting that ultimate prize of getting that World Series trophy. But really appreciate you taking the time, Vince, and telling us a little bit about your journey as well, and some of the lessons, and also giving some insight on some of the biggest storylines going into the MLB season. But for anybody that wants to follow your journey and also support you in any way, whether it's for your personal Instagram or just BR Walk Off, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so we'll run through real quick. We'll go personal. My Twitter and Instagram are different, but Twitter is at Vince Samperio, Instagram's at Vince since 91. For BR Walk Off, you can go BR Walk Off anywhere: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. And then Locked On Dodgers, you can go Locked On Dodgers, Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, there's a lot of places to find me, so I'll be out there.
Awesome. Everybody go and check him out. Not only does he do great stuff for BR Walk Off, but also Locked On Dodgers is a great way for you to stay in tune with everything that's going on with the team. But really appreciate you taking the time, Vince.
Appreciate you.